I want to welcome everybody this morning. I want to go over a few announcements. Right now, we've already got 33 people in our meeting, and I expect that number to rise even more before the meeting is over with. I'm going to get back over here, and there we go. All right. So a couple of announcements. If you haven't heard or already been aware of it, MTH is closing at the end of year 2021. They made that announcement this past week and made it public, but they are not going to be in business after 2021. Anything that you buy between now and the end of 2021 will have a 12-month warranty on it, and that's it. After that, there is nothing else. They're not going to do any more support or anything like that. So be aware that if you've got something on your wish list that you want to get from MTH, you might want to go ahead and get that ordered and put in place. We have received last month, for those who were not here, we voted to have a video switcher ordered. It has arrived, and Dave Cranda, if you would get in touch with Dick Brannon, you can go ahead and make arrangements to pick that up. I would not consider shipping it because Dick sent me a check to reimburse me for our Zoom registration. I want to talk about that in just a minute. And from Weatherford to my house in northwest Fort Worth, it took over a week to get here. The guy that delivered it, as I mentioned to Dave yesterday, he looked pretty haggard. He mentioned something about being held hostage by a tribe of Native American Indians, and he finally was able to get loose and walk the rest of the way to get the letter here to me to make sure I got it in the week that Dick Brannon sent it here. So the mail service between Weatherford and Fort Worth is not that strong. So you guys make arrangements to go and meet somewhere on the west side of Fort Worth or out in that direction, Aledo or whatever. We still need more volunteers for our video team. If you have an interest in doing that, please let Dave Cranda know. If you can go through me, that's fine. If you want to. I want to make sure and see here. Hang on a second. Is Mr. Corley on the call? I don't see him right now. But if you get in, Mr. Corley, I'm going to try to make sure, David, that he adds you to our website on our leadership team page, and that way people can get in touch with you. But in the meantime, send an email through me, and I will certainly get that over to David, and we can let you guys volunteer for our video team. We are going to, from starting in August, which is when we're going to go back to having face-to-face meetings, we are going to start recording all of our meetings and posting them on our YouTube channel, which is something else I need to ask you your help with. If you would, please like our YouTube channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, follow up on that. When you see a post, always like it. And here's why. If we can start getting more followers to our YouTube channel, if we break the 1,000 threshold right there, then YouTube will start paying us money back for our content that we posted on our YouTube channel. The idea here on this is if we can get YouTube to start paying us back, then it will offset the cost of our Zoom subscription, and then we can continue to put our meetings out on Zoom month to month to month, and then add more content, have more meetings on Zoom, and everyone who can't make it, like Dr. Tom over here from Division 5. Great to see you, Dr. Tom. It's appreciate you joining in. Anybody else from Division 5 and Bob down in your neck of the woods down there in our southwest corner of our division, then if you can't make it to one of our meetings, then you can certainly watch it on Zoom Live or follow it. We're going to be recording those and editing those and putting them on our YouTube channel. So that's the whole idea, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, for us to be able to do that. As I mentioned a moment ago, our August meeting, we're going to resume having them face-to-face. It will be broadcast again on Zoom. So you guys in D5 and outlying areas, you don't have to worry about it. You can attend if you'd like. By the way, Dr. Tom, I'm going to unmute you here for just a minute. Let's see here. Get down here. Tom, are you guys, have you had any conversations with anybody else in D5 out there regarding attending our meetings at all?
Right, not. Haven't heard from. Nope.
I'm sorry?
No, I have not.
Have not heard from anybody out there.
We're pretty, remember, we're pretty spread out.
I know you are, and exactly, and that's the whole point of us doing what we're doing here, right, and trying to help you guys get something. Anybody else besides Tom O'Hara from D5, if you could give me a thumbs up. That's it? Because that's all I see is just you, Tom. Well, I'm going to continue to send out the information for everybody in D5, Tom, because I know you're spread out, and if we can help service your area, then so be it. All right? Okay. All right. In August, we're going to start up our scratch building clinic on cars. We do have with Joe Lysing. Joe is away from his screen right now. But Joe came over to my house a little while back, and we were able to put together packets of all of the individual parts for everyone for Division 1 and 3. So if you've got, if you're in and subscribed to that scratch building clinic on flat cars, then we also are going to start that clinic there in August. One of the things that has happened since our last meeting, Dwayne Richardson, everybody know, is going to be leading that clinic, but Dwayne's got a laser at his house, and one of the things he did was he made this template right here, and he burns them on the laser. Now, Dwayne, I'm going to unmute you here for a second, and this is not required by anybody, but I'm going to tell you right now, guys, if you're trying to build a flat car, all you have to do is drop your wood into the pre-cut slots, and it's amazing. You can make a flat car in nothing flat with this. You just drop your wood into these lines, the pre-cut lines, and if you're standard gauge, Dwayne is making them in 30, 35. No,
these will be
40
these
foot.
will be single links.
I'm sorry?
The ones with 3 are just for the prototypes. The ones I'll be making otherwise are going to be just single links. So they'll be 30 footers for our clinic.
So
but basically, this is how it
one
works.
Up for standard gauge.
Nope, that's narrow gauge.
This is narrow gauge one there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the only real difference is the width of the car. 30 foot, still 30 foot.
Okay. If you would like to order one of these, do you have any idea what you're going to charge for these things, Dwayne?
I haven't stripped it down to a single and cut one yet, so I don't know about the cost, but it'll be really inexpensive. For the NMRA members, I always give a big discount anyway. So
this is something he's selling through his small company. What's the name of it?
Well, yeah, it'll go through TML models.
TML models. Okay. So if you'd like one of these, send an email, and Jason P says, what scale is it?
Whatever scale you want.
He can make whatever scale you want. Okay, Jason. So that's not a problem. In scale, HO, G, S, narrow gauge included.
They just get a little more expensive the bigger they get. I mean, I could even do Z
thing.
if you want it. It's just when you start talking about trying to scratch build an all wood car out of N, it's very hard to do, mainly because of the sizes. So the idea will be that the N-scalers are actually going to make a wood frame, but it's going to have a steel underframe car. So we're using a microtrains piece to take care of the underframe piece of it. So the N-scalers will be building their cars slightly differently than the rest of us will be. And I don't think anybody's in Z-scale over here in D1 that I know of. So I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, anything else, the bigger they get, they're a little more expensive just because it's more plastic and more time to engrave it. But
if you're trying to do one-to-one scale, he's going to have to glue several templates together to be able to do that. All right.
If you're doing one-to-one, we'll have to have some private lessons on how to do mortise and tenon joinery.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Thanks, Dwayne. Jason, yes, wood frame truss rods is correct on those on those things, on those templates. But if you want one, send an email to Dwayne and here's the email address. You might want to write this down if you're interested. The email address is Pine Creek Station. No, Dwayne says no. Where do you want it to go, Dwayne? Hang on a second. Okay, where do you want it to go?
For orders like this, send them to Dwayne, D-U-A-N-E, at T as in Tom, M as in Michaels, L as in levitate, MODELS.com. That way I keep it off my personal account.
Gotcha. All right.
And I'll get back to everybody. So I'll send out a note to news at Cowcatcher as soon as I can come up with what the pricing is going to run on them.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So watch your emails there on the reply. Okay. And Gordy, we can even send you one even across the pond. So it's all good, buddy. Okay.
You betcha.
By the way, we've got we're literally worldwide. Gordy's joining us from Scotland. And then Gerald Mabry's joining us from Kuwait City. We've got people here from Arizona and California as well. Welcome, Bruce. Good to see you. I like your shirt there with MRH on there. So that's very good. Yeah, I see it. You don't have to start showing off out there. All right. Besides, it's only 103 out there at 8 in the morning in Phoenix. Something like that. Yeah. All right. And Don, I tell you what, we'll try to get that address on the chat in just a minute, okay? Because I'm running this all by myself right now. Dwayne, if you would, can you go into the chat and put your what?
Already did it.
Oh, you already did it. It's there. Okay, good. All right. When you were pointing away from my chat window, so I didn't know what you were talking about. Okay, yeah, exactly. All right. Let's see. NMRA X. We've got a huge thing. Gordy, I'm going to unmute you and let you talk about NMRA X for just a minute. It's going on right now. And Gordy is multitasking here because he's doing stuff with NMRA X and attending our meeting. Welcome.
Hey everyone. Yeah, it's going on right now. Another 12 hours, although we're nearly halfway through already today. We've got some really great clinics this morning. Mike, you're doing a clinic later, don't forget, on using 3D printers. So some great clinics. We now go live on YouTube as well as Facebook. If you need subtitles, there are subtitles on Facebook. I can't promise they work with Scottish accents, but they're there. And certain other accents they don't work with, but they work as best we can. Yeah, some exciting stuff coming out from NMRX. There's another event in 2 weeks' time on the 27th of June. And then the really exciting thing is that the Gateway Convention in St. Louis, unfortunately, we lost it in July. We're replacing that with an NMRX event. It's going to be called Gateway X. We really tried hard with naming there. It's going to be called, there was a lot of committee meetings to come up with that name, and probably a case of bud. But yeah, we're calling it Gateway X. It will run from July the 12th at 8 a.m. Eastern till 11 p.m. Eastern, and it will repeat that for the next 7 days of content. There'll be a panel show about 5 o'clock Eastern every evening with myself before I go to bed. And then there'll be definitely live clinics. We're promising live clinics every evening, The content during the day may be some pre-recorded stuff that we've already done in the past. We've got quite a lot of videos that people have sent us that we've not been able to schedule. So there'll be a mix of new and old content, some of the best stuff there. But if you've missed the NMRAX events, and I get 12 hours, it's a big chunk to take in, although I could turn the camera around and show you that in Scotland in June, it is definitely not 103 outside. So we have all the videos as 1 hour segments up on YouTube. It's taken us about a week to get those up there. So all the stuff will be there. So come the 1st of July, there'll be 72 hours of content up there that's free of some of the best clinics you're going to get out on and about. And a few guys from this division are on there and other people from the Lone Star region. So it's been really good. A few things for you to watch out for. Keep an eye on the SCR region. They have lost their regional convention. They've approached the NMRAX team. And the NMRAX team will be providing them with a virtual convention, but that's going to be multi-threaded with multiple clinics taking place at the same time. Free registration, be all available on their website, and there's a meeting about that tonight about 2 o'clock in the morning my time. And then Mike didn't mention it, it's probably a bit far for you guys to travel to, but Trainfest unfortunately had to be cancelled this week because the venue is still being used as a field hospital by the state of Wisconsin. They've approached us. We're meeting tomorrow, and watch this space. It's likely that there'll be the first ever virtual train show. So it won't just be clinics. I've got to find a way of doing virtual train shows with various vendors doing product announcements and also discounts through the event. So we're working with Trainfest to try to put their event back together in the virtual space. So really exciting. And then the final thing, if you want to support NMRAX, we'd love you to support us, and with our friends over at Daylight Sales, who produce the Division 1 clothing, they're doing some NMRAX clothing, and a proportion of the sale from each sale goes back to the NMRA and is going to be used for NMRAX in the future to help us fund live streaming for various events all around the world that are NMRA events. So, yep, that's all the news from me.
All right, Gordy, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Right now, again, if you're after this meeting, there's still NMRAX content that's going on for the rest of the day. If you're interested in 3D printing and learning more about it, the 2 o'clock Central Time clinic on Facebook and YouTube talks about how to draw things for 3D printing. And then right after that at 3 o'clock from 3 to 4 our time, I'm doing a clinic on actually using the printer and things that you can print, how you can do it, and what to expect if you're using a 3D printer and things like that. So you'll be able to have a 2-hour block there just about 3D printing if you have an interest in that. Gordy just went to the chat area and made a statement there that if anybody wants to give a clinic, you get 6 volunteer points. Now, Gordy, is that per hour?
That's for each NMRAX clinic you give. And
it's a 40-minute, those are 40-minute clinics.
Yeah, you'll get 6 volunteer points, provided you give us a handout, which we post in the NMRA Facebook group. So just give me a PDF or give me a link to it on your website.
Gordy, I need to give you a little correction there. If you give them a handout, then it counts for author, not just volunteer.
Yeah, Dwayne's flashing. I don't know what he means.
Thank you. Frank says they're going to give them 6 points for this.
Yeah, so Frank's made a post yesterday that this is national, so you get national points. And national points are 3. 3 points. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah,
okay. I was going to say, wow, if they've done that, they've really bumped this one up.
No.
Yeah, and to Mike's point, if you provide a handout somewhere, you can count it toward author the first time you give it, and then after that, it would count toward volunteers. So
6 points for author. Did I get them the wrong way around?
No, it's same thing. The author, you just get credit for the page. So
yeah, so you get credit for the clinic for offer, and you get
Yeah.
3 points for.
and
Sorry, one of the guys who's claimed it twice. So I've done all the certificates and everything. So yeah, if you do it, you get in touch with us if you want to give a clinic. There was a bit of confusion as to whether it was going to be classed as a clinic or whether it was a live video recording. It's not. It's being classed as a clinic. So that's been confirmed. Give a clinic and. Give a clinic to NMRX. If it's the first time you've done it at national level, then you can claim offer if you've not already claimed offer for that clinic. And if you have done it and you need volunteer points, then you can claim your volunteer points. Either way, you need to give me a handout. You can't claim any points without a handout, and we'll put it due. How do you do a handout? 2 ways to do a handout. Either as a PDF that you send to me, and then we post that in an online space, either in the comments of the YouTube video or we place it in the NMRA Facebook group, or you give us a link to somewhere where you're hosting that handout yourself, whether that's a blog post or whether that's a web page or whether it's a PDF itself hosted somewhere else, and we'll provide the URL to that. So it's dead easy.
Dwayne, do me a favor, if you would, send the forward the email regarding this meeting to Gerald. He says he can't find his link to get into the meeting.
Will do.
All right, thank you. You guys go ahead and, if you would, go ahead and mute yourself back. I've got everybody switched now. If you need to ask a question or something, you can unmute yourself and then re-mute yourself after the question. So I went ahead and changed that so that you needed to pop in here and do this. How do you do a handout for NMR for the X conventions? Write up a synopsis, points, whatever, instructions for your clinic on whatever your topic is, and then after you've gotten approved to do the clinic, tell Gordy what you're doing, or Speed for that matter. Speed is also help schedule some clinics since he's here in the States. If you're familiar with Speed Muller over in D3, you can get in touch with him. If you can't, contact me. I can try to help you as well. But you've got to get your handout approved, and then when you do, then send it to Gordy. They'll post it online, and people can download it, and that gives you the way to do the handouts. Okay, I want to reiterate the NMRA youth policy that we must adhere to moving forward in the NMRA. If you have what the NMRA is labeling someone that is an at-risk person, which is anyone under the age of 18 or is a person of diminished mental capacity, and then if they're attending any NMRA function, an NMRA function, not a function like the Plano Train Show or something like that, but if it's an NMRA function, 100% club or one of our meetings or whatever, and that includes this Zoom meeting online, they must have their parent or legal guardian with them. If it's a Zoom meeting, their parent or guardian has to be able to be seen on camera. If it is a face-to-face meeting, their parent or guardian cannot be out of visual sight of that person at any time. Okay, so that's this policy, and it's a 100% adoption policy. If we're not doing it, and something happens, then the NMRA does not back us up. I want to talk about that and make sure everybody's on board with that and understands that it's just not an elective thing; it is a mandatory thing. We had a board meeting for the last Saturday, at which point there were several things talked about. I'm going to run through those real quick. We went over the youth policy again. There was a vote as to what the age where someone can serve and be elected to a elected position in the LSR, and that age is now 21. However, we also established an apprentice program in in our region, if you've got a youth member or a person 18 years or younger, actually, in this case, it would be one, and they want to start getting involved with the region, work their way in, get some experience, things like that. There's an apprenticeship program that we've established so that they can start doing committees and things like that, and work with a member to do that so they can get experience. And then whenever they turn 21, then, you know, they can run for an office or whatever in place there. 2021 regional convention is going to be in Tulsa. It's going to be a LSR and Mid-Continent. It looks to be going to be a good time. It's going to be fun. If you've never been to Tulsa and seen some of the lakes, they're absolutely phenomenal. I would hope consider doing that and going up there. Mark Lachey from is our ambassador to Mid, working with them shoulder to shoulder. He's made a trip to Tulsa to review it. It's going to be at the Embassy Suites in mid-June. I don't have the dates in front of me, but we've got plenty of time for you to do that. Also, I would urge you, if you would, start getting your contest models ready. I mean, a year out is not too early. Trust me. I'm currently working, and I'll hold this up. You guys can see it. I'm currently working on a version of the Tyler Depot for where the cotton belt was started, and I'm working on this. All this is 3D printed, and I'm working on this build here. And the model I'm building is going to have a in it by the time it gets to Tulsa, including. Wait a minute. Where are they? Here they are. I have a friend who's got a laser, and I've got, if I can get one of them down here, you can see it, a 5-blade ceiling fan right there inside there. So it's going to have ceiling fans and everything inside the building. It's going to be a great time up in Tulsa, and we're going to do that with Mid-Continent. The 2022 convention over in Birmingham, England was canceled. It was a domino effect, in case you haven't heard. It's the national convention for the NMRA. Since the Olympics were postponed for this year and rolled to 21, Great Britain and the UK have something they call the Commonwealth Games in off years for the Olympics. And the Commonwealth Games were supposed to be in South Africa. With the Olympics being rolled to 21, then South Africa couldn't host it, and it kicked it back to Birmingham, which was the backup site. So the location for the convention in Birmingham was absorbed by their Commonwealth Games, and the NMRA got booted. And so that frees up the year of 2022. We're still rolling strong for the 23 convention. Everything's going good. Dwayne, I'm going to call on you, if you would, if you'd go ahead and unmute there for a second. And by the way, you can unmute by hitting your space bar, I believe, on your computer. Dwayne, can you talk a little bit about the AP program and where we are on that, please?
Well, what would you like to know? During the board meeting.
Whatever you want to tell us.
And understand, they're called board meeting for a reason. It's one of those things where minutes are taken and hours are wasted. While everybody was talking through all the issues on board meetings, I went through and decided to finally drag the LSR's AP records into the current century, kicking and screaming, because in 50 plus years of the LSR's AP program, all of it's been documented on paper. And that's a scary thing for an IT guy to say, especially since I just finished my 6th year in this position. So I sat down and started typing up all of the LSR's AP history. I have it all in a database. If you have any questions, any concerns or whatever, drop me a note, give me a call. I have got it all set up to where it very quickly and easily will tell me what you have, when you got it, what you should be looking to work on, that sort of thing. So if you're thinking about working on this, and I wholeheartedly encourage all of you to, because it will make you a better modeler for a fact. And it's guaranteed or your money back kind of thing. So let me know if you've got any questions. There is a bit of planning that needs to go along with this, because unfortunately, a lot of people jump in and go, okay, I just need to get 7 and I'm out. Not necessarily, because you've got to get 7, but you have to get 1 in each of 4 categories. So we need to make sure that you kind of have a plan in place to, what's going to be the best way for you to attack it. So if you have a railroad at your house that's up and running, it's fully scenic, you've scratch built a few things, you may be really far down the path here and not even know it. So like I say, reach out, let me know what you got going on, and let's talk over what we can do. With the new normal now, there are some categories that can be judged remotely. Scenery, civil, electrical, things like that can all be done via remote distancing. We still have to look over things like structures and cars and low motive power, that kind of thing. So some of those will still have to be done more upfront, because you have to be able to see it very well to do judging for construction and that sort of thing. Now, I've done a few training runs with Mike with some photographs and things, and I think they've come out fairly well, but a lot of it depends on the lighting that was used when the photograph was taken, how good the photograph really is to begin with, how good the focus is. There's a lot of things that come into play, right down to the judge's own computer equipment. So if his monitor isn't very good, it could skew how the model looks. So some of that, they're still going to require eyes on the screen, but by and large, there's a lot of this that can now be done remotely. So if you've got scenery ready to go, let me know. If you've got civil, electrical ready to go, let me know. We can get on a Zoom call and do a lot of that online, and we can make arrangements for that to happen. And that's really going to be a boom for guys like Dr. Tom, who are way out in West Texas. There are certain things that we can get accomplished for him out there that without having to jump in a car and drive all the way out there. So, please give this some thought. And if you've got any questions or any concerns about, I don't like having my stuff judged or whatever, give me a call. Let's talk about that, because it doesn't have to be done at a meeting or at a convention in front of everybody and that sort of thing. It can be done in the privacy of your own home, where it's just between us. So, like I say, I really, really encourage it, because it will make you a better person, a better modeler.
Thanks, Dwayne. Dr. Tom, I'm looking at the bookshelf back there. It looks like you've got some boxes up there on the top that probably need to be opened or distributed amongst our members here, because it looks like those are some brass locomotives up there, and we need to get those away from you, because you obviously do not know anything about engine repair or anything like that. Okay.
Hey, seriously, Dr. Tom's probably the best guy I know of for fixing stuff. In fact, I've got one I need to send you, Tom. I finally found the box for our GS20, so I'll get with you on that one.
By the way, he does that very selectively on his time schedule. Ask me how I know that. Okay. Let's see here. Q&A. Does anybody have any questions on any modeling that they're doing? This, that, and the other. Questions about things we've talked about already this morning. If you've got a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and just ask it and go from there. So I'll open the floor up for anybody that's got questions. Anybody?
I've got a question.
Okay, Dave.
Painting with acrylics on plastic windows. I prime my windows with a fine Tamiya spray to prime them, and I find that painting the windows with acrylics is very splotchy, very streaky, doesn't look good. So what's the secret?
Okay, first off, a couple of things, and this is something I learned this past week. The correct pronunciation of that paint is Tamiya. I didn't know it. I've been pronouncing it the way you were pronouncing it previously. It's kind of like the Kato thing.
Okay.
It's actually Kato, but you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Okay, so the next thing is painting your windows. Okay,
Yeah.
Why are you painting are you using Duralar? Are you using regular plastic? What are you using?
The plastic windows themselves?
Yes.
He's talking about the frame castings.
The plastic windows that come in the bar mills kits.
Oh, you're talking about the casting, not the glass.
Correct.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Wouldn't
Dwayne,
paint the glass.
What do you think?
It depends on the colors you're using. Dave, when you start talking about, and this is especially bad with acrylics, but it was even bad with enamels. Depending on the pigments of your colors, some come out better than others when you're brush painting them.
Yeah.
Whites and yellows, and especially yellows. Yellows do not brush paint for nothing. I don't care what kind of paint it is. They always come out looking kind of thin and kind of streaky.
Yeah.
Airbrush them. That is always the best route to go when you're doing a really light color. Darker colors seem to do a little bit better, and even that depends on what color we're talking about.
Yeah.
Some greens, especially really dark greens, tend to have a problem with that, and I don't know if it's just because of the yellow that's mixed in with it or what, but some dark greens are problematic, and that even goes right down to painting something full size.
Yeah.
I mean, our house is mostly green, and painting the back of our front door, I had to do that a couple of times and almost sanded the whole thing off and mixed up some paint and shot it. I got that frustrated with it because it just doesn't want to cover very well. So that's always my recommendation. If you can't get it to brush paint it, you've got all those castings out there. Just mix up a little bit of paint in the airbrush and airbrush them.
The paint I was using was a raw umber, and the craft paints like you would get at Hobby Lobby, and I tried thinning them. I tried going straight.
Yeah.
And they just don't brush very well. And I had seen a video from a guy I think he's affiliated with American Model Works, and he was using a sponge to sponge paint his windows. And those look kind of, he was going for more of a worn, splotchy look anyway. But
yeah. And that's exactly what that sponge is designed to give you.
The sponge technique too.
Yeah.
David, I'd also, something you may want to look at is getting a really, really nice airbrush, like a Harder and Steinbach airbrush.
Oh, that one.
Yeah,
that one.
Like the one you borrowed from me.
Oh, darn it! Why did I bring this up? All right.
Yeah.
So
I've always had trouble with craft paints.
Yeah. To echo what Jeff just said, craft paints and plastics don't mix well.
Okay.
Those things are meant to be put over plaster for little ornaments, or they're meant to wood because it'll absorb it well. Craft paints just tend to have a problem with plastics, and that is irregardless of color. So look for some Vallejo or some something that's a little more geared toward plastic modeling. And
How do you say Tamiya, Mike?
Tamiya.
Tamiya.
Yeah.
Tamiya makes a good paint. So does Vallejo. So does, if you can find the AK line. There are a bunch of lines like that make good paints as far as adhering to plastic. But the craft paints, if I'm not painting wood, if I'm not painting plaster, I stay away from them just for that reason. They don't adhere.
Yep.
Yeah, they work great on wood.
Yep.
Yeah.
They work great on wood models, but the plastic windows, I'm just not satisfied with the texture of it. Let's say it that way.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Yep, same here. Now, the other thing to keep in mind too, if you have a lot of windows in your train room or wherever you're displaying your models where they can get a lot of UV, those craft paints will fade out pretty quickly. So you got to be real careful about UV exposure with those as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, Mike, I got a question, and I know the answer, but my feeble mind can't remember.
Okay.
In scale.
Yeah.
There's a good joke there, Dave. Be careful about setting up a straight line like that in front of this group.
You know what? I love setting you guys up, so have at it.
There you go.
Hey, when you land flex track, Atlas only gaps the ties on one side. Does that go to the inside of the curve or the outside of the curve?
Inside, put the gaps, the openings toward the inside, because that way the ties have room to kind of compress as you bring them into the curve. The bottoms of those ties are going to want to move in. So if you've got the splines there, it's going to want to prevent that.
Yeah. What's interesting is that I've been laying a lot of track lately, and as I'm going along, I'm going, okay, inside, and then all of a sudden I go, wait a minute, am I doing this right? So now I've got some track inside and outside. It doesn't really seem to make a difference.
It really doesn't if your curves are broad enough.
Yeah, they're pretty broad.
Yeah.
I mean, my minimum radius and end scale here right now is 18 inches.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's huge.
So
yeah, you probably won't have a problem with it, either way. But yeah, typically on one, if they're not alternating, gaps to the inside.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's it. Bye.
All
No,
right.
I'm still here, but that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Anybody else have a question on anything?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
When it comes to painting with acrylics, like most water-based things, have a surface tension that's greater than lacquers do. And just like we add a drop of alcohol or two when we ballast and so on to break the tension, it works for paints too. So I paint with acrylics as well as lacquers still. I'm old hand. But I add a tiny bit of alcohol and I have no trouble getting the acrylics to spread out on surfaces smoothly. So I paint tops on engines and cars and so on. And so I won't say that long term, I mean, maybe it'll streak. I have no idea, but I've had no trouble with that, just plain old alcohol. So I'm suggesting somebody just try it.
Cool.
Yeah, good point.
Good tip. Good tip. Thanks, Tom.
Also, the Liquiflex folks make a additive that you can put with acrylics to make it flow better, and it's called like Flow Master or Flow something or other. But Liquitex has a, which I use, but that still doesn't help craft paints.
The Liquiflex doesn't, Jeff?
Yeah, it makes it better, but acrylics, for whatever reason, I don't think were designed for plastics. They were designed for woods and plasters and every other thing, but whatever it is, they just do not adhere well to plastics. I've had it paint on there, had a great paint job, and have it flex and flake off.
Yeah.
I mean, it just does not adhere well. I don't care if you watch the parts before or not.
Yeah, the other one, if you're airbrushing it, is Vallejo makes this guy right here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that works real well. It'll help.
All right, guys. Anybody else have any questions or comments here?
Yeah, Mike.
Yes, sir.
On the acrylics, take a look on YouTube. A lot of the custom model car builders are using acrylics on those model cars, and they have.
It's not acrylics in this case. It's craft paints. They're not the same.
But no, it's craft. They're using some of the craft paints, but they're having good success with it. Now I don't know if it peels off or fades, but it looks good online.
Interesting. David, yes, it's too late to get in on the car building clinic. This is supposed to have started in January. No, February. It was supposed to have started in February, and then it was supposed to start in January. Then it got pushed to February. Yep. Then it got pushed to March, and then COVID hit us. And then, and the reason it got pushed off was because suppliers didn't have all of our parts back to us the first 2 months, so we couldn't start. And then COVID hit us in March, and we haven't had a face-to-face meeting, but we do have all the parts now. But unfortunately, yes, it's too late to get in on the car.
Well, let's back that up just a second. If we can provide you with a parts list and you can get the parts on your own, then you're definitely more than welcome to take part in the class itself. It's just we can't get the parts for you at this point.
That's correct. Don, alcohol, wrong kind of alcohol, not for drinking. That makes your lines start to blur and you get all kinds of crazy looking things whenever you're doing your paint if you're using Tito's. All right, there you go. Let's see. Jason Parham, welcome, by the way. Welcome from Birmingham, Alabama. Or wait a minute, it's in the States. Birmingham, Alabama. Not Birmingham.
Birmingham.
There you go. Gordy, have a great day. Thanks for joining us for a while. I know you got to get back to your NMRA X. The craft paints can fade from UV exposure, yes, and it possibly could. I wouldn't try to make it fade on your model, but if it does, so be it. If that's what you're looking for, so that's a kind of a personal thing.
Yeah, that's one of those. It would take a long time to get that effect. It'd be quicker to just try to mimic it through weathering. Yeah,
just let it be weathered. And a way to do that, and we'll talk about tips and tricks in a minute. Remind me, and I'll talk to you about a way to mimic that fade out effect, and we'll go from there.
Well, don't throw away any of your Flowco. I opened a bottle the other day and it was just like brand new.
Oh, good for you.
As long as you still have it, check it out and don't just throw it out because it's got the wrong name on the bottle.
Yeah, exactly. I've no joke, guys. I've got Flowco that goes back to the old square bottles from back when Dad was in this back in the 70s, and I went cruising out there needing some black and borrowed his bottle, and I still have it borrowed, and it still has good paint in it. So as long as you keep your paint bottles sealed up and everything well, that stuff will last for ages. So don't discount it. If it's open it up, check it out, shake it up real good, give it a rip.
By the way, I just now noticed. Welcome, Pete from San Diego. We're glad you're here. Hope you're getting something out of the meeting and enjoying our little get together here. All right. Does anybody else have anything else they want to? Yes, Pete. Go ahead. Unmute yourself. Spacebar. There you go.
I just found a new type of paint that I wanted to share with people. Is that appropriate to do it now, or should I wait for tips and tricks?
Why don't we do it at tips and tricks?
Okay.
Does that work?
Yep, fine.
Okay. Very good. Very good.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You go back to that acrylic paint. Liquitex makes a flow aid. You mix it 20-to-1 with water, and then mix it with your paint, and it makes it flow real easily.
Very good. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right. Anybody else have any questions about anything? Reggie, go ahead and tell us what you had there.
Well, hey, I'm Reggie Thomas. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, so I'm new to the group. I've been modeling since, my goodness, 1979. My dad bought my train set in 78, but we had limited funds growing up, and so I used to improvise, and we had acrylics, but we won't talk about the one model I caught on fire. To get the acrylic to stay on there, what I did was I pre-diluted them with a type of, oh goodness, Testors had a dull coat, and there's a better one now, and I would recommend it, but I was in a desperate situation where I couldn't get the paint I needed, so I dull coated some buildings. I have it on my buildings now, and if it's not a great huge surface, sometimes a pre-coating, kind of like a primer, will work, but it's a little
and that's exactly what you were doing with the dull coat, just adding a primer coat.
Yeah.
And so that absolutely, if you're going to be painting anything, I absolutely advise doing a primer coat. I mean, this is a casting here from Rusty Rails, and it's a plaster casting. You can see the plaster on the bottom, but absolutely, 100% all times prime it. Okay. All right. Anybody else? There, somebody didn't mute their phone, and that's what happens. So there you have it. Okay. Without further ado, as the new Netflix David Letterman television show, if you hadn't checked it out, with this person, our next guest needs no introduction is the name of his show, and I'll use that tagline. He's presented for us before. He's done an excellent job, and he always comes. He is a professor at University of North Texas. He is a past professor at Texas A&M, Gig'em, and we are going to see a great presentation today on building Texas and Pacific boxcars. So without further ado, I give you Mr. Jim Ogden. Jim, I'm going to go ahead and let you start talking, and then I'm going to switch over and let you be the presenter. You can unmute yourself there.
That sounds good.
All right.
Y'all hear me okay here?
We can. Let's see here. Make you the host. All right. There you go. And I'll let you give that back to me afterwards, okay?
Okay. Well, I was going to talk, just let me see where the TNP boxcars is here. I want to share with you a little bit about the TNP. My interest in the TNP, most of my life was kind of spent in Louisiana, and one of the things often happened is we'd go down to visit family in South Louisiana, and I always had an appreciation for the TP. We always would go down from Monroe, which is where I grew up, and we go through places like Alexandria and Bunkie and see all sorts of interesting stuff. Now, the TNP was always part of the Missouri Pacific, I guess we'd say, sphere of influence. But they always had a lot of independence, and that's not that uncommon in railroading. I mean, the Cotton Belt always had an uncanny degree of independence from parent SP, and you get some slight differences. Now, I realize a lot of people aren't going to be modeling the TP. A lot of people aren't even modeling the same gauge, but I'm trying to make this a very general talk with some of the ideas about some of the things that I do. For a lot of people, the TP is kind of like, okay, this is a car that my railroad picked up in Longview, and we're going to take it from Longview on the Santa Fe into, wherever. Or this is how did this particular piece of railroad equipment show up? But I'm just trying to get people kind of pointed in the right direction. I have a really long, detailed railway prototype modelers talk that I give, which I kind of get lost in the bushes, but I don't think that's really what we want to do here. Now, most of us are looking for something a little bit more advanced than the old Athearn blue box models. That's what I grew up with. I can certainly relate to having kind of limited funds and going to the model train shows and getting the $1 a piece Tyco gondolas, which is pretty close to a DB car. But you're looking for something maybe a little bit more advanced than the old Athearn blue box. And one of the things I really love doing is putting together resin and freight cars and detailing locomotives and scratch building structures. Now, just to let you know, I do have an appreciation for other scales. This is maybe a little bit too easy to do. Of course, this is, what is it? I guess that's the Lionel poultry car, or egg car, fresh eggs like that. Lionel did a lot of interesting kind of things. I don't know if this is the correct blue or not, but let's kind of get back to the ranch here. Now, let me go ahead and see if I can move the little Brady Bunch thing out of the way. Now, TNP had a large number of boxcars that had a 10-foot interior height. As you look at boxcars, the 40-foot ubiquitous, all over the place boxcars, you'd be amazed over how many actually had a 10-foot interior height. You had things that had the late style roofs and late style ends on Southern Pacific that had that 10-foot interior height. A lot of boxcars weren't really filled to capacity anyway. And you got to have several of these for a convincing roster. If you're modeling something other than TNP, these are going to be visitors that you want to have. And one of the things that I think is always a hallmark of the hat tip to Mrs. Hall. One of the things that's always a hallmark of freight trains out of the 40s and 50s is you had all these different height cars. You had little small 9-foot interior height cars, the 10.6, which was the later standard, and then you had things with raised roofs. There were 2 lots on the TP. They were both ordered before the Second World War. One was by Pullman, one was by Mount Vernon. And the brake cylinder was always mounted, that reservoir was always mounted diagonally on these things here. Now, MOP didn't have any with this 10-foot interior height, but a large percentage of TPs were this way. The MOP had the little short ones, which are available through Atlas. And so you had all these different kinds of, kind of the sawtooth kind of heights, which to me, that pretty much screams you're in the 40s or 50s. So this is the classic thing you usually think of. This is early 50s TNP boxcars. That this had the diamond, which appeared in 1947, the more rounded version of the numerals, And of course, the relatively clean car, although you can see the streaking on here, which is something I like doing on models. This door has been replaced, and I always used to buy these front range cars when I find them at train meets. And then of course the doors, I'd save the doors. I hoarded everything. Tag boards eventually wound up getting lowering to comply with different kinds of interchange rules. This of course still has the ampersand, which is that little and thing, which I think went away in 1948. And of course I'm trying to give make sure that I have the original photographer cited whenever possible. Now this is from Dick Kelb's. Now this was taken there in Dallas. You can see a little bit of bleaching that's gone on there with the cars. Almost look kind of pinkish. Here we see the ampersand ampersand dropped. And the ends are black. That's usually asphaltum or black paint over asphaltum. But this is a relatively clean car. And by the late 50s, they were actually replacing most of the doors with these 5-panel doors. And this is another one, and I forget who I got this from here. I do want to let you know the Mopax freight car red was more red than Mopax. And this is one at Texas State Railroad. This, I think, was a car that was actually being used as a storehouse in Shreveport for a number of years. This is a Jay Tatum photo. And this one may have never had the black undercoat on the ends.
Can I ask a question here, Jim?
Please do.
When did they at some point overpaint? It looks like this particular car, they changed it to just the T and P and not the T and P on this one. I don't know if I can see it.
I think this was actually, there was, I think, the directive from the ICC. I'll have to look in one of my references to where they no longer used an ampersand in reporting marks. And I think it was 1958.
What is
all railroads?
What does the X in front of the number designate?
That means it is in company service.
What kind of service?
Company service, maintenance of way.
Service, okay.
Hey, Jim, I think on the ampersands, I don't know if the T&P may have dropped them earlier, but I think a lot of that happened in the 70s and 80s and stuff as computers. I've heard that the computer did not recognize the ampersand, because I know GM&O, which is mine, they use the ampersand on theirs all the way up to 70 when they merged with the IC in 72 in that case. So
yeah, I've got some reference somewhere, but it was just kind of like I mean, they weren't going to do things like tell you to extinguish your torch and vote you off the island, because you see they're still using it as part of the corporate name. And I mean, they were using a lot of promos back through the mop takeover. They had this just go TNP, and they probably would have gone with a very fancy script, which is kind of interesting. But this is kind of what they were. I'm trying to think. I mean, the Santa Fe, I think, dropped their ampersand way before that. But typically, you would have seen this car in service probably about 1962, and it would have had a TNP number in the 4000s, actually it would be in the 40,000s, similar to what we see right there. But this has just been painted over and was used as a storehouse, and this went to the Texas State Railroad. Now, I'm not trying to trash the Texas State Railroad, but they actually were able to figure out what this is that very same car. And some cases they would paint things, and a friend of mine told me they painted this thing. It didn't bother to, they just painted over the rust, and it didn't work out too well. But at least it got a coat of paint on it. And of course, you can see an ART reefer behind it. And some of the stuff on the Texas State Railroad with their little collection is quite fanciful with the paint on it. Now, this, of course, is probably a repaint from 59 or 60. And you got very small reporting marks. And of course, another friend was telling me that they were told that they're the standards for all the reporting marks, which probably ties in what Jason was talking about earlier with the fact that you had some early things that were readers on these things. 70s, everything was being read by computers. And of course, you had the ACI labels and all those sorts of things. This one may have not had the black ends. Everything's kind of their version of freight car red. And it's my understanding there was an undercoat called asphaltum that they would paint the underbodies with, similar to what we have on an automobile. And a lot of cases, the ends were painted that way, and there were paint reactions between the paints. Or we probably had the what Dwayne was talking about is the curse of mellow yellow, which, you know, yellow paint doesn't handle well anything painted over asphaltum. This is a Jim Sands photo from 1966. And this is a car that I photographed in Bunkie in maintenance of way service. And they didn't do such a hot job with painting the maintenance of way number. But you see, they were still keeping in 1975 the TNP diamonds. After that, they began painting red over the top of it. And usually they didn't do such a good job. They wanted to get all that, Mott got very image conscious for a while there. Now, this is what I think is cool. Some of these little cars were converted to mail storage in the early 50s. This is the Dick Kelb's photo. And the ends may be black. They may be unpainted asphaltum. I've seen them dark blue. I've seen them roof gray. Evidently, it's kind of like evidently it's whoever was painting that day. And we're trying to get Hubert Mast to actually do decals for the Texas and Pacific mail storage. And this little decal, which is a cream yellow with a blue, Jim Wise actually has a decal available for that through his, what is it, Apple River or whatever it is. You know, he's now, I think, working as a truck driver. He was, you know, did a whole lot of custom painting down in the Fort Worth area. Now, I haven't seen him in months, but I know he has the decals available. But they ran these things in pasture trains. They had steam lines on them. You'd see them all over the country. Some of the most interesting photos I've seen were taken in places like New York City. This is one of the models I made. And right after I did it, I cannot remember who told me this. Put a wood roof running board on the roof. And one of my friends said, oh, by the way, they replaced them with Apex running boards. These decals were at one time available through Martin Lofton of Sunshine. But I, you know, didn't make up any new dirty words for my friend. And this, of course, is getting an Apex metal running board. So how do you model this stuff? Okay. MWIC, which is the way we always pronounced it, later Red Caboose. They also have these things available in scale, believe it or not, with Intermountain. But these tools have been around for years. Intermountain supposedly has their own version of this. You get them in N scale. You can get them in O. I actually was playing around on the web and almost picked up an O scale version of the car. Just to, sometimes I do kind of leave the ranch here. Now they have two versions of this MWIC or Red Caboose car. I think they call it the square corner post version. That's note that is a modeler's term that we use. That's engineers have a different term. And I ordered the doors from the old front range 40-foot box cars and cut them down by 6 feet or 6 inches. Now the original MWIC cars had massively out of scale grab irons, but Red Caboose actually was marketing ones that fitted to scale. Now, by the way, just to let you all know, Intermountain is now being run by the son rather than Frank Angstad, and he is no longer offering parts available unless it's a part that was omitted from one of the kits. So if you can find the Red Caboose parts, they're much more to scale. You can also get Katie's Delrin grab irons intended for the PS1 box cars. We'll probably have to drill some new holes with a pin vise. And a friend of mine with Yarmouth Car Shops has a little etched metal jig for this, and you can actually get your number 80 pin vise drill bit. I've gotten to be very friendly with McMaster Car with buying these drill bits. Now, TP did something weird with these cars. Unless you're Santa Fe, in which he did something, they mounted this reservoir transverse. These cars had an Apex type metal running board. Etched metal version of this are available through Pierre Oliver at Yarmouth. I've used a lot of the old Overlands. People didn't know what they were, and these were available on eBay. Like, okay, give me $2 for it. I don't know what this thing is used for. Plano makes these. Planos are actually probably more like the prototype, but they're much more delicate. And of course, Katie also has running boards in Delaware. Now, by the way, I'm using the railroad term for this running board as opposed to roof walk. Everybody I knew that was on the railroad called them a running board because, you know, it's a holdover from the old days in which you had your brakeman's club and your hand setting that brake and you were literally running from one car to the next. And if using the Delrin stuff, I like using canopy cement that most of you can get it at any of the hobby shops around here that cater to the aircraft modeling community, because you're going to wind up getting expansion and contraction that'll pop these things off. Now, here's a dirty little secret about how sometimes we'll put a metal running board from Overland or from Yarmouth on. Some cases, I mean, this is probably going to have people wanting to jump out of windows right now, but some cases, if it's a plastic roof, I'll actually get I'll actually get a soldering iron and touch it very lightly to the little plastic supports on the roof. And I've had zero problems with these things ever popping loose when I do that. But don't overdo it. I mean, that's something that basically makes people want to jump out of the window when I tell people I do that. That's kind of like trying to swat a fly with a sledgehammer.
Jim, you do that. You obviously do that. Once you put it in there, you do that from the inside of the car, correct?
No, actually, I'm actually have the metal running board on top of the car, and I'm just kind of touching the supports.
I see what you're talking about.
Very lightly.
A metal running board, not the Delrin or anything.
Yeah, the Delrin stuff, I haven't tried doing that yet. I've been attaching those with canopy glue because one of my friends swears by it.
All right. I just didn't want anybody to get the wrong impression of what you were doing and how you were doing it.
Oh, it's kind of like, you know, with me. I mean, you start when I was in a model railroading club when I was in grad school at A&M. I had a friend who was talking about this. Here's the most useful tool you can have in your toolbox is a soldering iron. He said, "Ain't no need in using a screw to put these couplers in or these screws. I mean, you don't need a screwdriver. You just heat up the." And he was literally putting the screws in Anthony shake the box, blue box kits, and getting the soldering iron, melting the plastic. So that thing ain't never going to come loose, and you never have to tighten it. And he was the same guy that wanted to know if we became a NMRA club, what are we going to do with our Katie couplers? Because if we're a NMRA club, we're going to have to use those NMRA couplers, those X2F horn hooks. And we all kind of looked at each other like, oh my gosh, did this guy just say that? Well, we got to be compliant with NMRA. And this guy got the nickname Nimrod right after that, which was kind of interesting. We kind of looked at each other like, oh my gosh. This is a mail storage car. This is the repair and place facility in Texarkana. The TP's over here, you have a ditch, and on the other side, you actually have the cotton belt. And the 2 yards were right next to each other. And then the cotton belt, out of sight, actually had a warehouse that was actually close to Union Station, which was on the MOP TP side. And of course, on one side, on the other side of the engine house, you actually, from what I understand, it picked up MOP as opposed to TP. But here we see one of those cars has dark blue ends on it. And I'm going to have to look at this a little bit more closely. This may actually have a wooden running board on it. But a lot of cases, they paint these ladders yellow. It just depends on the whim of the painter. And all these can be modeled with that red caboose kit using the square corner posts. My favorites were done by Ed Hawkins, as he was editor of the MPHS Eagle for a number of years. And they had the most accurate lettering I've ever seen. I don't know if any of you know Ed Hawkins, but he's extremely OCD. And we kid him about having the notoriety of being both a Mizzou and an Aggie at different times in his life. He's got his master's from A&M and has his bachelor's from Mizzou. And we always make jokes about that. Now, Red Caboose had some that they offered. The lettering was not nearly as correct. I'm one of these weirdos. I like having MS for Marshall shops on my car, as opposed to something like new 1940 and have all the late style lettering. Also, kind of from time to time, we'll go in and change the dimensional data and put reway data on it. Now this is one of the cars that Ed Hawkins offered. It has the older style pre-war numerals. I did a little bit of other stuff with the weathering on this. I kind of did that. I've done a lot more weathering on this car. And I've got it in a box somewhere. I did not get it out, but I believe I actually also changed the dimensional data around to show something that reweighed in the 50s. This builder's photo from Archives of Canada. And car numbers are square and have a similar stencil to what they used on their steam locos at the time. This is one in service. And 1947, they added the diamonds. After 57, you didn't see the ampersand. I'm trying to see the memo that I had that said you were to drop this. They would send memos out, and somebody actually saved them. 63, Mott began exerting influence. And this is something that, you know, we were all thinking, okay, this is something somebody was playing around with this. We got some extra stencils, some extra decals. Let's stick it on here and see what happens. This is actually a Scotch-Lite logo. And, of course, here's the TP diamond. And, of course, all of us are kind of joking. This never happened in the real world. Then somebody came up with photographs in New Jersey of these things operating with this, you know, intermediate style. Hey, let's stick it here and see what happens. Of course, I'm also seeing something that isn't supposed to happen with a car with riveted sides, which is called oil canning, you know, which is kind of this little undulation you see in the side sheets. This is the standard paint on TP cars from the 62, 63 era. After that, they went to Texas Pacific lines. And of course, for some reason, nobody lowered the tack board on this guy here. And this is a model I did using Champ decals. And I used, I think, scale code 0012 paint, which is a little bit more brown here. Didn't even get around to putting the running board on yet. Okay. 1951, they returned to Mount Vernon car for another series. These had the higher interior height. That was now the standard. They didn't want to pay any extra money on getting something to a lower interior height. They had what modelers call a tab side cell, diagonal panel roof, an early version of the improved dreadnought ends, apex running board, Ajax brake wheel. And this is an out-of-the-box kit from Branch Line. Atlas was actually selling these at a reduced price probably about 3 or 4 years ago when they acquired Branch Line trains. But these out-of-the-box pretty much work. They didn't bother to move this reservoir to the brake system transversely. And of course, around 1961, this would have been repainted. And of course, then there was a series Marshall built in 54. These had a straight side sill, which Marshall favored, diagonal panel roof, a later improved dreadnought end, a universal or Eureka handbrake available through Detail Associates. These had what was called a gypsum running board, as opposed to Apex, which had a slightly different pattern. And of course, that is available actually through a gypsum running board is available through Pierre Oliver at Yarmouth. Plano has it. I cannot remember if Overland ever imported that, but then later they rebuilt these things. They had a narrow door on it. And they said, okay, people are complaining you can't get a forklift inside here. Let's rebuild these things. And this is pretty much as they came, original paint. And of course, I just get an evergreen 1x10 strip and cement over the top of there. You have to do a little bit of cutting back. And of course, A-line has steps that work quite well on this thing. But this can be done in an evening. Dick's Kelbs photographed the first car in the series, which I thought was so cool. And by the way, in railroading, you get extra points if you can have contrasting paint when you reweigh it or relube the bearings. And this, of course, is showing the 6-digit MOP number. And I forget where it's at return to information here. This is one still in service in 1979. They decided to paint over the top of the TP diamond, and it, you know, after weathering, it came through again. Now, what I thought was kind of interesting with this is it's got the MP, they painted out the T, and you see it doesn't exactly line up the same way. That's kind of what you saw back then. And of course, some of these went into mail storage as well here. Now, they rebuilt some of these things with 8-foot doors. I'm not reading my PowerPoints here, but they added loading devices. A lot of stuff got damaged due to shifting loads on here. Some even have 9-foot doors, is my understanding. These were assigned to the Bob plant in Arlington. And they kept the original brake wheel and running boards. And after the rebuilding, a lot of these things only had TP. Now, this is a study in weathering here. And it's kind of like if I were to do something like this, you all would say this is over-weathered. But I guess you can kind of spray this thing with different kinds of blacks. And something I've actually done to try and simulate this is I've actually taken an old T-shirt with toothpaste after the paint is dried and tried to get some of the grime off of it. But this is a really grimy car. And this picture was taken in 1977. And of course, this was had the DF loader belts. This, I guess, is trying to see if this is an 8-foot or a 9-foot door. And this is one I built from an old front range car. Now, the front range cars, they had separate sides and end ladders. They're oversized, but they're not as badly as the old CB&T cars. Center sill resembles nothing on any real freight car. When Red Caboose took over the tooling, they retooled it and put it in a much more accurate version with a center sill, and the railroads call them cross ties, which are the transverse members here. Running boards, just throw them away. They're grossly oversized. These cars, as they came from front range, you had to use an offset KD coupler. But Red Caboose, when they took over the tooling, they retooled it. Now, front range cars used the later style improved dreadnought end with narrow 6-foot doors and tab side sills. This magically does work if you like Fort Worth and Denver, which had no relationship to the TP, but that's what I was buying a lot of these stuff and doing them as. For the TP cars, it's just cement and evergreen 1x10 HO strip, and you got a straight side sill. And I can kind of relate to Reggie talking about having kind of limited funds. I used to see these cars go for $2 at model train swap beats, and these are it's too much problem to put together. It's people don't know how to do these things, so I pick these things up. Now, other things happen. Again, Arlington had its large Buick Oldsmobile Pontiac plant, and they also did GMC trucks. And a lot of the cars were actually being used by the TP for this particular facility. And they typically get a change in number, and there were a lot of one-offs. There were even some cars that had, 9-foot doors and 10-foot doors, and you see them from time to time. So that's pretty much all well, no, let me talk about this little thing about suppliers for super detailing. I've actually enjoyed building a lot of Pierre Oliver, Yarmouth scale shops kits. Done a lot of etched metal parts, very good running boards. He has jigs for drilling holes for mounting the grab irons, replacement steps, which you have to bend yourself, replacement ladders, even air hose brackets. Associates. It's my understanding that these things have kind of spotty availability. They did a large number of different HO scale brake wheels and coupler lift bars is what I think they sell them as. And Cal scale was kind of the go-to for the Ajax brake wheels and housing and brake components and different levers. Pierre ideas on all these different linkages and levers and different parts you see underside of a car. I was a friend of a guy called Richard Hendrickson, who was really big in the railroad prototype modeler movement when I guess it was still a movement. And he said, it's just model the stuff you see in profile. If you're doing something for a certificate with NMRA, you can model all the other things as well. But in most cases, you're only going to see a profile of it. He said it's kind of like when they did Band of Brothers. these tanks that everybody thought were panthers and tigers were actually fiberglass shells on an already existing tank, and in some cases even a bulldozer, just trying to get the illusion. But if you're going for a certificate, yeah, you can model all the different things like other kind of linkages and lines and filters and things like that you have with the different piping that's underneath. Katie's Delrin running boards are actually quite good, and they're actually, believe it or not, more to scale than many of the etched parts. They also offer the brake wheels and housings, as well as the grab irons for the sides of cars. The PS1 grab iron on the side of cars is just a generic item anyway. At Overland, you can still sometimes find the roof walks as they market them on eBay. Plano also has running boards as well, and etched metal ladders. If it's kind of like if you really want to add stress to your life, start trying to put together these ladders for the first time, and then it kind of starts falling into place. That makes you want that will make you get full use out of your optimizer. There's another company, High Tech Decals, that makes freight air hoses that are quite to scale. And for scale coat paint, I've always used their 0013 box per red for the classic era TP stuff. It has a redder color to it. Early 60s, the red, they changed paint suppliers and they became a little bit more brown. And then late 70s, they started going back more red. It's always a color drift card. Yeah, close enough for government work. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about here. I gave you kind of the big overview version, as opposed to the get lost in the. I've actually had talks I've given. Well, this is the Universal Railway Equipment Company brake wheel. This was only used in the third quarter of 1953, and then they went with a different. I'm thinking, okay, thank you, okay. People do get lost in that level of detail, which is kind of fun. Power to these guys like that, but some cases we do actually make concessions to. Okay, I know this is a Eureka, not a Ajax. That's going to be close enough for me. And these are meant to be operated. If you want to have something at a national convention, yeah, you're going to probably go with 3D printing and actually come up with something that is the exact model and has the correct number of spokes on it, as opposed to a different design, or this actually had a different vendor for this particular brake component. But that's pretty much what I was going to talk about today. I know we've got other things that need to be talked about. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Jim, if you'll go ahead and give me the controls back as a host, that'd be great.
Okay, doke.
Answer the questions, and I'll handle the Q&A part.
Okay, let me go ahead and. Okay.
All right. Who's got questions for Jim Ogden?
Hey, Mike, it's
anybody?
Marty McCoy.
Hey, Marty, how are you?
I have a question for Jim. Jim, do you know roughly in its heyday the shops at Marshall, how many people were employed there?
I really don't know. Wish I did. I'm sure they probably have some records there in the county as to who all was there. I think my hunch is probably when they closed down the shops, there was probably something. I'm got a mental block, can't think of the name of the paper in Marshall, but they would have said, yes, the TNP shops, once home to so-and-so and so-and-so, many people have closed, and yada, yada, yada. And I actually knew a person who was part of the little team that had to go over there. They actually had turned out the wiring in the shops was actually that old cloth wound wiring. That's what actually caught on fire there. And there are all sorts of urban legends about how the shops burned and how the shops were closed. But they would have records as to how many people were working there back from, say, the 1940s through the 50s, because I'm sure they were. But I know the paper would have actually had records over all the people that were employed there, because MOP opted not to rebuild the shop after the fire in, I think, the late 70s or something like that. It was not arson. It was actually they wouldn't spend the money on rewiring the thing.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
This is David Hager.
Hey, David,
Yes.
go ahead.
I'm curious about what your approach is to selecting your initial color when you're going to paint a car or a locomotive or whatever it is you're painting before you weather it.
Well, before I weather it, some cases I'll actually just go with an off the shelf paint from, say, either True Color or Scale Coat. And if it's got to be bleached, sometimes I'll add some white. Sometimes I even add in a little bit of yellow so it doesn't turn pink on me. Because fading does happen with things. Even on a clean car, I like the idea of the underbody's always got to be grubby, the roof is always got to be grubby, and that's something, flat surfaces never get washed. You got all sorts of clean cars that looked relatively new and clean that, yeah, the coating was coming off of the roof. But a lot of cases, I just go on whatever I'll go with maybe Scale Coat has probably 3 or 4 colors. The True Color paints are actually pretty close. But I know when you actually use a smaller scale, we have a little thing that's called, what do they call it, scale distortion. Colors appear darker as you get in smaller scales, and in scale, I've got a friend who actually, she is an advocate on adding a little bit of white or yellow, a few drops to the paint, because of the fact that as you get smaller in scale, essentially you get just a dark brown or dark red structure that you can't see any of the details on. But I just go with whatever True Color, and of course I've got a good friend that I referenced earlier, Ed Hawkins. This guy actually got into American Car and Foundry with Paint Records or Mount Vernon Car, and he actually purchased a whole bunch of paint specs on different railroads he got to the point of, say, the Santa Fe had 3 different versions of their mineral red and used in the 50s. And I said, so what do we use? Well, we don't have a record as to what car what this series of car had on. I said, so what would you do? He said, well, I just use one of the other 2, because the thing is that the employees would look at that. Yeah, close enough for government work. And it's close enough to the color drift card. I mean, it's kind of like in the lettering, it's not a font, it's a stencil. And I've actually seen and held some of these stencils and looked at them. Of course, they don't lose sleep if they get overspray with the what they call the spray gun. With us, it's the airbrush, it's a spray gun. They don't care. But a lot of cases, if you're weathering over it, I've had friends kind of playing around with the different kinds of paints from, I think, I'm glad to find it's Tamiyak now. They actually have some red browns that are very, very, very close to our freight car reds, just convergent evolution there. But I just go on I'll go on whatever some of the guys say about the paints. To me, the reds on freight cars don't really suffer from the scale distortion as do some of the other colors as well. My favorite scale distortion color is a locomotive color, Seaboard Airline lime green. You use the same color on a E8, on a model E8. To our eyes, it's going to appear an off-white, but you use the same out of the I know someone who painted, I think, an O-scale model for someone who was retiring. And he said, that's after dinner mint green. I've never seen that color in my life. And he had to go back and repaint the thing for him using a white with a little bit of green added. But I'll just, I think that most of the colors, Ed Hawkins has been working with a lot of the paint manufacturers like True Color and Scale Coat to get it. The colors are fairly close to what the prototype is. But if you want to lighten it, and this friend of mine who does N scale, she was adding maybe a little bit of a yellow to it or a little bit of a tan to it, so the boxcar red doesn't become boxcar pink. I probably answered every question except what you wanted to know. But anyway.
Jim, any other questions for Jim?
Jim,
yes,
Mike, I don't have a picture from anybody at my end.
I got everybody's windows and I can hear everybody talking, but I have no video picture other than seeing my own window here. So I don't know who's in control right
Where do you
now,
live?
but
There's a view up in your upper right hand corner of your screen, and if you look at that, one of them's kind of looks like a checkerboard, and that will give you an everybody view. Rather,
were you able to see the presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah. The presentation was fine.
Okay.
It's just when you switched over to answer questions, everybody's window is blank. I have everybody who's online here. I can see them all names, but I have no pictures. There's no video coming through to me from anybody.
Well, that's.
I think that's on his end.
Seeing everybody's pictures and movement and everything around, so I'm not know what's going on your end.
I think this is recorded. See, if you want to look at it online, you can see what they kind of Zoom call the Brady Bunch.
Well, the problem with that is he is the person that's supposed to be recording it.
Okay.
So we'll see how it turns out, David. All right. Anybody else have any questions for Jim?
Yeah, I got a comment just as far as colors, though. I mean, I know somebody was asking, like, what colors do you use like this? Sometimes, guys, on the railroad you model, some were rather notorious for not being very consistent in that. Based on just down to the shop that might have done it or what day it was being done and who was on duty.
A lot of cases they even mix the paints in the shop.
Correct.
Like, yeah, that's close enough.
Well, I mean, like I'm a GM&O model. I've developed with our historical society for the caboose project that we did for a wood caboose with American Model Builders, and people were asking me when I order them, what do I paint this? What color do I said, just bright red. I was like, well, bright. What do you mean? I said, well, the guys in the shop over at Tuscaloosa, they have told me, they said when they would go down there, I was like, they just run down to the hardware store and just ask for Coca-Cola red. They wouldn't ask for they would not ask for like, I need DuPont number this or whatever or something. They would just, just go grab it, get over there and stencil them up,
I know for a fact, we're talking about the TP, they, era days, they liked having a simulated, Russia iron border jacket color. And you could actually buy the actual real Russia iron paint, which a friend of mine actually got it, and he realized it was very close to the German gray green that was used on uniforms in the Second World War. He was all excited about that, but they actually went into the Marshall shops and said, "Well, we didn't always have that around, so we weren't going to." And we would have to place an order if we were out of it. So we got this gray paint, and then we got some Pullman green paint, and we added this in. Yeah, and Joe would come over here and said, "Yeah, that looks right. That's close enough." And supposedly every locomotive had a slightly different border jacket green, and as long as it was clean, they were pretty happy with it. Sometimes it would have almost a blue color. Sometimes it'd have more of a green. Sometimes it looked more gray. And they did not lose any sleep over it, as long as it's kind of like every model was a little bit different.
All right.
And
anybody else have any other comments or questions for Jim? Jason, go ahead and pass out corn to everybody.
I'm in a hurry.
I don't know what all the menu is, but you've got corn. I don't know what Dwayne was eating. This falls into that category of etiquette on your Zoom meeting. We're watching you chomp away, guys.
Yum,
okay?
yum.
Freeze your video.
It falls into Mama actually cooked something. Don't argue. Take it while it's hot.
All right. So, Jim, thank you for another great presentation. Do appreciate it. You still have got the host thing. If you'll go ahead and revert that back to me, I would appreciate it. That would be great. All right. Let's talk about some tips and tricks. First off, I want to talk about a little bit that came up in in Jim's presentation, it showed that he was talking about the railroad prototype modeler. While I'm thinking about it, the RPM meet, if you saw in the whistle, was canceled here in Dallas-Fort Worth, unfortunately, but they're talking about trying to have a meeting and a get-together sometime in November or December where everybody can do that. So we'll take a look at what they're doing there. I'll keep you posted as things develop there. Talking about fading paint, we've touched on several different ways. If you're going to start fresh, use that adding a lighter color to it, like Jim was talking about. If you're trying to paint over an existing blue box or model that's there, one of the things that I have done in the past is very, very lightly with an airbrush come back over that original color with the original paint job on that stenciled model with a coat from way off. Just stand back and just very lightly spray over that, and it will fade out that bright color that came from the production line, and fade out. Also, it will fade out the stenciling. Now, to come back in there and do one of the things that Jim was talking about where you get extra points for re-stenciling the maintenance date or a number, or changing out a place where the reporting marks were, or something like that. You can come back in with either liquid outline for stenciling, or what's the word I'm looking for, Dwayne? Where you paint around something, and then masking tape, a liquid masking, or you can use blue painter's tape or whatever, mask off the area, and then come back in with full, after you've faded it out, come back in with the full coat of it and spray it very lightly right in there. So you don't, when I say spray it lightly, I'm not trying to get you to deteriorate the detail on there, but you can come back in there with the fresher color and then place your new decals on there and things like that, and it will give you that look that it was re-stenciled when it came in for shopping and something like that. Dwayne?
Two things there. Number one, that is definitely going to Dallas via Oklahoma City. Take your blue painter's tape, cut you a little rectangle, and put it directly over the decals that's already on the car. Weather the entire car, peel the tape back up.
You can do that as well. You know,
so it saves you all that extra painting and all that extra redecaling. The other one too, I think you might have missed this when you were talking about fading out the lettering. You want to thin that paint down.
Yes.
A lot. I mean, you want this to be an almost impossibly thin wash, because if you use full tilt paint, you're going to cover the lettering up like that.
Yep.
You want to use a real thin wash. And I mean, when I say impossibly thin, I mean darn near clear, and because you want to be able to layer that up a little bit at a time until you get a coverage that you're happy with, because it's very, very easy to overdo it. But to the point that Jim and Mike were just making, if you get it too dark in some places, it's okay. Around your card numbers, if you're in operating, that's a problem. But then you do the exact same thing the railroads did. Mask it off, repaint it, put a new decal over it, and you're done. So it's something that can be corrected if you do get it overdone. Something else I like to do too when I'm doing that little fade out, I like to put a drop or two of white in it, as Jim pointed out. I know some other modelers that advocate for that as well. They'll tell you flat, never put a drop of white in everything. Don't care what the formula is. This guy would even take it to the point of, he would come home, he would open up a brand new bottle of paint, take his little dropper out, put a drop or two of white in the whole fresh bottle, put the lid back on it, and set it on the shelf. He was just that anal retentive about it. But there was something about adding that extra bit to it that just toned it just enough. And you can play around with this. If you're building an entire fleet full of cars, as Jim pointed out, they were 3 different colors, I think it was, Jim, they made in box cars. You could take that and mix yourself up a couple, 3 different shades that are relatively close, and paint one color and one the other color, and a third one a third color, and so on down the line. And it will give that variation in shade to your fleet.
Hello, everyone. So how to make someone post?
I'm sorry, somebody say something there. I missed it. Guess not. Okay, another thing for a tip and trick. We've talked previously, and maybe it was in this meeting, it was in a Division 3 meeting, but we were talking about brush cleaners. I went over to Hobby Lobby and picked up a couple of different items here. This particular product is a brush cleaner restorer. It's made by Winsor and Newton. These are over in the art section. Okay, a couple of things I want to tell you about with this. It works fabulously. Pour a little bit into a container and wash out your brush with that. I took a brush that was completely caked up with acrylic and had the paint had dried up into the wicking all the way down to the ends of the bristle. Left it in that material there, kind of washed it out a little bit, and I'm talking about in a minute and a half, it completely restored that brush and brought it back to its original point. Amazing stuff. I will also tell you that when you're putting it in something, I had it in a plastic shot glass that was a gift. So I had it on my workbench and poured it into that plastic cup. I will tell you that when I came back to my desk, the liquid had eaten through to the line of the top of that plastic shot glass and had overflowed on my desk, and next to it was a template that I'd gotten from Dwayne, and it's what's the word I'm looking for? I just had
etched it.
It etched it because of the capillary action of sucking that material underneath the acrylic here, so it etched it. So word to the wise, put it in glass whenever you're putting it out there to be used. I also brought in and bought this by B&J, the Masters brush cleaner. Okay, this after I used that, the other product, this is more like a saddle soap type material. Okay, and you can moisten your brush, wipe it through this, and it's a kind of a conditioner for your brushes. This brush right here was the caked up brush, and if you can look at it, the bristles are absolutely pristine and back to what it was, a little broad brace brush. I also had these two brushes and this brush here that I used on the restore aspect of it, and all three brushes are absolutely pristine and right back to their original shape. And that white brush was a green color, and now it's completely back to its original state. So I strongly recommend those two products if you're interested. You can keep your brushes and also restore them. Dwayne, you have any other tips and tricks you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I got a couple of things I guess we can talk about here. Let me switch my cameras here. One of the things that Jim talked about in his clinic was about running across the running boards, and it's kind of hard to see it down there. Let me hold these up a little bit. A lot of times in the old days, especially when you had no air brakes, you were running back when you had to have a brakeman running across the tops of the cars. A lot of times when you look at those old pictures, if you're lucky enough to find any, you'll see them coupled in such a way, well, you just can't see it, can you? Where they'll put the brake wheel to the brake wheel. So they'll actually go through and turn the car so that when they couple them up, the brake wheels are right there together. That way the brakeman can set one brake, step across the gap there onto the other car, set the other brake, and then run down to the next pair. So this was something you would see a lot in the really early ones, if you're lucky enough to find any of those for your railroad. And there are a few of them out there that I have for the narrow gauge stuff, and you'll see them done like this. And a lot of that was done for expediency of your brakeman. And I've got one picture, in fact, that's got enough cars on it. And I was wondering how much grade they had to worry about in that particular set, because there was literally a brakeman for every pair of cars on it. Now, that little train was only able to pull a handful of cars, so it wasn't like you had 15 guys standing up along the route of your train. But there was a good 7 or 8 brakemen standing up there, and each one had a pair, and each car was set up just like this, where they were basically backed up brake wheel to brake wheel. The other thing that he mentioned too that I wanted to talk about was that sponge technique. And this is something that if you're in the bigger scales especially, you might have already done this. In HO, it's debatable as to whether or not you're going to like the effect or not. But this is just a piece of packing foam.
Dwayne,
I get this out of, yeah.
You're still not close enough to the camera for us to be able to see that well.
It's not so much close to the camera, it's also lighting and everything else.
Okay.
So it's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I'm just letting you know. Okay.
Yeah, this is just a piece of packing foam. This literally came out of a layer in a box from Blackstone when I got some equipment in. But you can get this stuff. You want a real open cell kind of packing material. I've seen some guys online that'll actually go over to Home Depot and buy sponges like you'd use for cleaning. I've not tried that one yet. I'm wondering how well that might work. But you'll just take this, and I tear it into smaller chunks. So something like this. And then I will take those irregular edges, and sometimes I'll even stack up 2 or 3 of them, and then I put them into a pair of negative tweezers. And then you want that irregular edge across the bottom. And you'll take that, and you'll do it almost like a dry brushing effect. You'll take it and get a little bit of paint. You'll dab a lot of that off in a paper towel or whatever, and then you'll just come back in and you're blotting it like this onto the model as you work around a surface. And the idea is that it gives you this irregular, splotchy kind of a weathering effect. It's really, really handy. It looks really, really nice in the bigger scales especially. The tank guys do this quite a bit when they're simulating weather. What you really don't want to try to do is to take a very straight edge. So you don't want to take these and cut it with a pair of scissors and then fold this up trying to use the really flat edge of it. You really want the irregular piece of it, which is why I literally just tear off chunks and then hold it with a pair of these. And you can flip this around. Be very, very careful when you're blotting it to try to use a very light touch when you're doing it. You don't want to press down real hard unless you're trying to get a fairly complete coverage with it. The idea of this is you get not necessarily a streaking effect that you get with dry brushing, but more of a just mottled effect. And this works out really, really well. Again, S and O, especially G, would be wonderful. In HO, you'll have to play around with a little bit and see what you think. I've tried it on a few things, and it's not too bad. Getting a mottled effect on brick, it works really nice for that. I've been playing around with some freight cars and testing out these jigs, and I've gotten some so-so results with it. I use this building tanks and stuff a lot, so it's a handy little effect to try, and I would really encourage everybody to do it because, with everybody getting stuff in from Amazon, it's all gone to those air packet things. So some of this can be a little bit difficult to find, but when you do find some of this sheet foam like this, set that aside and give this a try and see what you think.
All right, Dwayne, thank you very much. I'm trying to get something set up here to show you guys here, and my camera wants to droop on me a little bit, but we're going to do that here. I want to share that to Dwayne's point here, that brick effect, or that effect of the splotchiness. I'm using this on use that same effect. I'll try to get it here where you can see it. It may be better to do a different camera for lighting purposes, but you can color to them, and we all know that bricks fade out, and not all bricks are the same color when they ultimately end up right straight out of the block they're in. So this is some of the other work, and you can see how the colors on this thing were not matching completely, and I used that sponge effect well on that building that I'm building for Depot. So that's another example of exactly what Dwayne was talking about on how you use that particular effect to get that splotchiness and not completely uniform. Guys, it's 11:54. We've got just a few more minutes until our noon meeting is. We're trying to keep these from 10 to 12. Does anybody have anything on anything they're working they want to talk about?
Let me unmute myself. I was going to just share a new paint that I've found that I really like a lot. Hopefully you can see this. It's called MRP Mr. Paint. It's primarily for the military modelers. There's only a few sources here in the U.S. right now, but this is the best paint I've found to just take it, open it up, and dump it into your airbrush, and it just flows great. This particular color I used is rust. Their model is MRP-029, and it's really good for a faded boxcar red. Every other paint I've used, and I've used lots of them, need to be thinned a little bit for your airbrush. And this one doesn't. You just dump it right in. It's an acrylic lacquer paint. You can use the Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. Works really well with it for cleanup and stuff. But I like it. You're going to be seeing much more of this as the military guys get involved in it. So that's my little short tip for the day.
Thanks, Pete. We appreciate it.
And some hobby towns carry that.
Hobby towns carry it because they're not listed on the web?
Yeah,
Really?
it depends on the hobby town because those are franchised out. So
Yeah,
not all
right.
of them carry the same things. But yeah, the hobby town down on, over here on Central has either Mr. Hobby or Mr. Paint. And then the one down on, used to be down at Walnut Hill that's down now off of Mockingbird. They've got probably the best paint selection in town. And
Really?
I think they may have both. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I was over there.
Well, this is
that might be a little bit of a hike for you all the way over to down off the Central Expressway here in Dallas, since you're in San Diego. But
well, I get it at Military Hobbies up in Orange, California, in Orange County. For anybody that's interested, the website is www.mrpaint.sk. These guys are out of Slovakia. And
can you put that on the chat if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure, I will.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
By the way, Chris Galvin, I wanted to do a couple of things. Number one, your Black Bear and Bayou shirt there, I recognize that you're wearing.
Oh yeah.
I also wanted to commend you on your helper that you've had in the background today. That's there helping you model while you're doing some stuff there. You can do a good job in starting them young and getting them in the hobby. So I applaud you on that. The other thing for everybody, if you would show some appreciation to Mr. Galvin for an excellent newsletter that he provides for us all the time. Good job, Chris. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And I'd like to know, as with all of that, why he hasn't submitted his author paperwork.
Oh, and the hits just keep on coming. I'm sorry, Chris.
Told me that all the writing that I do, I get maybe like, a point or half a point
per page.
Per page. There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, it adds up.
And you've definitely done the work. If you've got any question about how those points are accumulated, Chris, call Dwayne. I'll bet you.
I have talked to him before, but I need probably a refresher. So.
All right. I want to tell you guys, and I put this in my article in the newsletter this month. Guys, now is the time to, well, it wasn't in my article, but it was in a sidebar. If you would, man, now's the time to take a look and submit your paperwork. Volunteer, author. A lot of you have already done this work and everything. A ton of you guys, and I don't want to call out names, but I know that just looking in here, a bunch have got the work for volunteer. Some of you've got the work for scenery. Some of you've already done the work for most of the work for civil, possibly electrical. we were trying to, Dwayne and I were talking about some stuff for Leo and Lori Paletti, who own the Blackberry and Bayou that Chris has got the shirt from. With the help of Mike Corley from the Texas Western, he's able to go in and pull up all of their operating records from the operating sessions that they had. Daryl, I know that he's got your information as well. You probably have earned dispatcher if you turn in a couple of drawings. The thing on the drawings, and this is something that we were going over with them, Dwayne and I were, if you're a member of a club and the club, somebody in the club has drawn the layout and done the timeline of trains on there, that works for everybody in the club. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. Put that on file at your club, and all they have to do is go in and pull that file up, print it off, and add it to your paperwork. And if you've done the running the trains part of it, which is the fun part of that one, of all the certificates, quite honestly, if you run your trains in all the categories there, man, I'm going to tell you, that's one of the easiest ones to get. And it's one of the most fun. So Leo and Lori are wrapping up their paperwork on their dispatcher. I know they're fixing to get their cars out of the way. Mike Ross is about to get his structures out of the way. So there's a ton of people doing a lot of good stuff, but now's the time to do that paperwork. So I urge you, I plead with you, I'm begging you on bended knee to go out there and finish up your paperwork right now.
Put a little pen to
get
paper.
it submitted and put pen to paper. That's really what it boils down to, guys. You've worked, get the sheepskin, put it on the wall. Maybe it doesn't guarantee your family's going to be happy, and they're going to be thrilled to walk by and go, you know, this is the work he's done. We did the same thing with one of the latest MMRs in D1, which is Stan Prochowski. He was one certificate away from getting his MMR, and his daughter browbeat him into doing it because she said, you know, you've got one of the great layouts in the area. We need you to come by, and we'd love for you to finish that up. And so we were able to get that done. And he did a great job, and we got his cars in one afternoon. We sat down and did it. Joe Lysing was over there, and David Cranda was there, and the three of us sat down and judged his cars and got that out of the way. So I urge you, I plead with you, sit down, turn in your paperwork. Reggie, you need to join the organization if you haven't already, because you can't get those certificates unless you're a full-fledged member. So we want you to do that as well. Hey, looky there. He's already got his letter back from National.
Sweet.
Cool. Excellent.
And something to keep in mind, guys, is it. I've had a lot of people go, well, I'm 75. My layout's already done. I don't have time to do all this over. You don't have to do it all over. This is retroactive. You can get all the stuff that you've built your entire life judged.
Yes.
So don't let that part of it bother you. If you think that you've got to start from scratch, you don't. You may have to build some things because you didn't scratch build a lot of cars or whatever. But yeah, definitely look at getting involved. I mean, you hear me say this a ton, and I've said it 2 or 3 times today. It will make you a better modeler. And I've had people argue that with me, and it's just like, nah, I don't see it. I really don't. And every one of them who has gone on to become an MMR, I'll call them up and say, hey, I just saw the news. Congratulations. And he goes, you know what, Dwayne, you were right. It really did make me a better modeler. It made me stop settling things. I mean, how many times, and I guarantee if every one of you is honest, everybody will raise their hands. How many times have you been working on a model and go, that's good enough, and you leave it, yet you know it's a mistake. Well, when you start working on this thing, you're going to go, well, that's good. Oh, no, it's not good enough. Somebody's going to look at this, and you'll pull it back apart, and you'll fix it and do it right, or you'll just do it over one way or the other. But what's going to happen is your models will look better, and people will recognize this. People walk out of your layout, and they just look at each other, and they go, that's the kind of stuff this will lead towards. So it is one of those things that It will do it. I guarantee it. You're going to take things that you have done for decades a certain way, and you're perfectly happy with it, but you're going to learn along the way. And I know I did in several different cases where it's like, you know what, his rust is better than my rust. How do you do that? And you'll sit down and he'll walk you through how he does it. You'll go home and try it, and you may end up doing it the same way. You may end up taking that and adding something to it, or mix the way you did it with the way you used to do it. And you may come up with something that you like better that's a hybrid of all of that, but still you have now learned how to do something different and how to make it that much better. So it really will help you, drive you into doing stuff like that. I am constantly looking for new things, new techniques. The weathering pencils I talked about last month, that's something I picked up from Pete, who was on our call from San Diego. Got that from him, ordered them up. I've been using them here a little bit here and there. I really, really like them. I've been weathering with different pencils and stuff now for years, but it was a new technique and a new tool. And it's you start getting adventurous about your modeling and not just falling back the same old thing you've done before. It really will help you out in the long run. And like I say, if you've got any questions at all, please let me know. And to that end, Mr. Ross made a comment about using something here in the chat. I highly recommend Robert's Mortar Mix. Okay, so what exactly is Robert's Mortar Mix? Where are you finding that? I've never heard of it.
I've seen advertisements. I've used it for years. I think it's the only thing the guy makes. It's like a latex paint or caulking that's mixed up in a certain way. You smear it all over your brick. You let it dry and you wipe it off, and then you've got mortar in the cracks, even in HO. Yep. And you can color it slightly. It comes with a slightly off white color, but you can put any acrylic color in it. And like the wall that Mike Mackey showed, just you put that on there before you put the corbels, and it just makes it pop.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could Google it. I've seen the ads for it though. But,
yeah, I'll go take a look for it. Yeah, you can get a lot of that same effect. I do a lot of that with just acrylic paint. Bragdon actually makes one a powder now they call mortar that I've tried on a couple things. The one thing, if you're an HO, if you're an N, this could be really problematic for you. If you're an HO and you're working with kits that the dyes were made, many, many decades ago, a lot of times the mortar, if you really were to scale it, this is me kind of like getting on my soapbox about nail holes. I hate nail holes, mainly because the head of that nail is supposed to be really, really small. And yet when you scale it out, by the time you make that hole with a pounce wheel, that nail head's about the size of a dinner plate. It's just way too big. The problem with the mortar is a lot of times the technology they had available with them to make those dies and to carve that out, the mortar then scales up so that your mortar line is almost as tall as a real brick would be. So you have to be really careful about what you try that on. Design preservation models, the old DPM stuff, those work out really nice. They're a little newer. Some of the Cornerstone stuff works out really well on. But if you've got some of the old, like Revell and old Concord and things like that, sometimes that mortar will bite you. So it's always a case of test it and see what kind of effect you're going to get. But yeah, adding mortar to your brick is huge. It really can make a model pop. And the neat thing about it too is you're painting the wall first, and then you come back in and put that mortar on there. It'll actually fade that brick red a little bit too and help age the building out. So yeah, definitely give that a rip. I want to try this stuff. I've not done it before.
Yeah, and you let it dry, and the more you rub, the more that comes off, and you can really thin out the mortar lines. And then of course you've got this. You're left with this mortar type haze variable, just as you said, weathers it beautifully.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate it. That's a good tip. And to Dwayne's point about nail holes on buildings, and David Crumpton and I were going over one of his buildings here recently, and I want to give you this example. And this is, if you stop and think about this, and I've heard Dwayne give this example before. Think about this. If you stand 87 feet away from a building, your house, anything that is nailed together, 87 feet away, I challenge you to tell me where there's a nail on a wall, on a board, because that's what you're looking at. If you're 1 foot away from one of your models, effectively that's 87 feet in scale. If you're using HO. All right.
Yeah, if it's an old board that hasn't had a coat of paint since Moses was a pup, then
that's
yeah,
one thing.
You're going to see it. because you're going to see that that's not only oxidized, it's actually started to rust, and you'll see a lot of little rust streaks down. It's the whole notion of everything is dead straight and it's on a painted wall. Having worked on a framing crew for a couple of summers and having put some siding up, I can tell you we did not use a straight edge and very carefully align every one of those nails and measure that they were exactly 2.5 inches apart. You walk up, you set the nail, you hit it once to set it, you hit it once to drive it, and you boom, and you just walked up and you just laid it up there, and you missed the board, the next one will hold it on. You don't worry about it.
And those wheels, whenever you roll them across the board,
perfectly straight.
It's absolutely straight, and that's not the way it's really done.
But more importantly, the whole idea of the effect is it's supposed to represent the paint has come off the head of the nail and it's oxidized, and now that's starting to cause a bit of a weathering stain. For that, they use a pounce wheel or a pin or something like that, and they make little holes that then they then do their alcohol and India ink wash, it seeps that, and you see that now. But like I say, when you scale it out, the head of that about this big around, and that's just way too big. A very, very sharp colored pencil, you can walk in there and just do a light little alignment, and like I say, don't use a straight edge, but just kind of get close and walk you a few little pencil dots up there on a wall that has not seen paint. If it's got a coat of paint on it, you will not be able to see that nail from 87 and a half feet away. You just can't.
The other thing I've been working with lately is the mortar, pencils, the weathering pencils, going down the mortar lines and playing them with that in a little bit of water. One of the problems that you have in using any of the liquid mortars is that it does bleed into on top of the surface of the brick. As an old bricklayer, I can promise you that didn't happen. Hey.
Yeah, you got to be really, really judicious about getting that cleaned. You got to be careful about it not getting down into the mortar line and reactivating whatever it is and lifting it out of that too. So yeah, it's a real dance. It really is.
So I'm gonna Jason, SER, unmute yourself for a second if you would. I know some of the work that you've done over in Birmingham. You've probably earned several certificates. Do you have any of the AP certificates at all?
I got a volunteer. I got a volunteer certificate. I know that. I'm probably halfway to a structures. I've got a couple cars that have made AP certificate, but I don't have enough to get the. Excuse me. I've done a couple cars that have made.
Merit score?
Yeah, merit score, but I have not got enough to get a AP certificate out of it.
Well, and to let you guys know, Jason's joining from Birmingham, Alabama, and in his region, it is considerably harder to earn merit score on items over there, unfortunately. And as you go from region to region, even though it's supposed to be uniform and the judging criteria in certain regions difficult than others, it shouldn't be that way. But there was a friend of mine had a building that went to one of your contests, Jason, in your region, and it did not merit. And I know the building, and the building, I worked with the guy to help improve the building and really trick it up. And I mean, like,
work, but we
he
threw
did
out a
the
lot of
work.
ideas.
We were just giving him ideas over the phone.
Yeah.
We didn't do a Zoom meeting.
I'll give you an interesting, funny story about you talking about the nail holes earlier. Our club, the Wrecking Crew, we've had 4 MMRs in our club over the course of its existence, and several guys that have made several certificates. We actually call we call ourselves nail holes on your models. For us, is a badge of honor, because we call it the FNH Club, and it goes back to an inside joke. As one guy got critiqued when they were doing a judging on his model, And he if you know, the N in the H stands for nail holes. And if you know Frank Smith and his colorful language that he has, you can figure out what the F is. But so we call it the FNH Club. if you've made a model and you put nail holes on it, you are thereby a member in the secret society. So
well, the model that I was referring to did not get a merit score. It was several points shy, and I know the modeler. I know the model. It had full interior detail. It had the guy had gone to it was a church, and the guy had gone to the trouble to actually research and come up with stained glass window patterns that would match the size of the windows to go in the church from European churches. He printed that off and installed the stained glass window in the church. He had an altar. He had red velvet runner down the middle. He had Bibles and hymnals on the pews and in the back of the pews throughout the church in HO scale.
Was this wouldn't it have been at the Huntsville convention?
It was not. No, it was
not.
not.
Because I know there was a lot of models there that went way under what I thought they should have made.
Well, that's the general case I'm just on my soapbox here. Dwayne got on his a minute ago with your particular region. When the model did not score well, he sent it to me. 3 MMRs judged the model, and he ended up scoring a 109, wasn't it, Dwayne? 112, somewhere
like
through there.
He brought it to our convention
112.
and scored about the same.
And it ended up going to a convention in Beaumont, got novice best of show, and won the category in our region. So, unfortunately, the judging does not correlate one way or the other.
Well, yeah, the judging matrix, and I've worked with Larry Smith here in our region here at a couple of the past couple conventions, and started to get my hand on doing it. And that matrix does help to do that, but at the end of the day, it is a subjective thing. I don't think you can take that out.
Very much so, and that is one of the disadvantages to doing, because then it gets all about what does that particular modeler see, whether you want it to or not, what you like can color your decisions. I mean,
yes, but at the same time, it does help you better. And we at the last one we had over there in Chattanooga, the last regional convention we did, we had several guys, and I think we had a bunch from that division, the old headquarters division, got in there. But there was one lady, she had submitted, I forget her name, but she had submitted a model, some scratch built structures, and we were showing her, like, okay, yes, this did not score well, but now here are the things that
and that is so important that if you're getting a model judge, give them feedback.
Yeah,
give them feedback as to what you would do differently. Yeah, exactly. Why did they lose points?
One of the things that we started doing when I was in charge of the contest room here and we're still trying to do it now, and unfortunately it doesn't get done as much as I still want it to be, is whenever we're judging those, if we're doing it in the contest room environment, if we're doing it in person, we'll just give it to them live. But when we're doing it in the contest room, I tell the guys, flip the pages over and write the guy some notes on the back of his score sheet to let him know, yeah, you lost 5 points in here, and here's why. It doesn't always get done because we get in a bit of a rush. If you've got a lot of models in the room, it takes a while to stop and do all of that. But it is something that I really, really want to work on the teams and really start pushing this more, because it's kind of gone downhill the last couple of years. But the whole idea of this is for it to be educational. What can I do? I mean, okay, great. I had this scored in a 95, and yeah, that merits. Okay, that's wonderful. What do I do to make up those lost, 30, 35 points? What can I do to make it better, to improve my skill set? And that's really what that feedback's all about. And even if you're not interested in the AP, sometimes just having your friends come you're doing, just tell them flat, hey, look this thing over, tell me what you see, because we will get very tunnel visioned on our projects. I mean, they kind of become our kids, you know. I mean, for those of you who are a parent, you know how quickly you can get all angry at when somebody starts criticizing your kid. And it's nature, you know. I mean, when you step back and realize it, like, yeah, my kid's being a twerp and he shouldn't be doing that, but you still get defensive about it up front. And we do that with our models a lot of time, and that's why a lot of guys don't like to go through the judging process. But it's one of those things. It's required, as you know, to score it, to see if it passes muster. But remember, 87.5 out of 125 is 70%. That means if it's a C minus or better, you should merit.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
you know, it's not that hard to hit a meriting score with a model if you put a little bit of effort into it. And, you know, that's why I always tell everybody, you said you meet an MMR that thinks he's all that and is very full of himself. Kindly remind him that 87.5 out of 125 is 70%. And the only thing MMR means is he's done a lot of paperwork and he's certifiably average.
But at the same
Jason,
time,
would you do a favor, Jason, if you would? Gerald Mabry is also on this Zoom meeting with us. He's in Kuwait, but he's actually lives in Meridian, Mississippi. Would you send him a private message in the chat and give him your contact information? He's requesting that. So if you could go in there and just, instead of when you over in the chat, the 2 instead of from everyone, you need to just go in there and
well, I'm looking at that right now. The only way it's letting me do everyone and you, and I can't. I tell you what, I'll just send it to everybody. You talking about you want my email or
yes,
what?
he's looking for your email. Okay. So very good. Also, Dave Griffith had to step away, but if you'll notice over in the chat, he listed a link there for Robert's mortar mix that we were talking about a few minutes ago that Mike Ross was mentioning there. So you can find that as well. Guys, it's coming up on 12:20, a little past 12:20. We've run a little bit over, but I hope you guys enjoyed the meeting today. I think it went pretty well. We had close to 40 people on today, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to especially thank Jim Ogden for his presentation. Thank you so much, Jim. You did another great job. And next month in July, we're going to have for our presentation Trapper Kirkpatrick, Dwayne, myself, and let's see, Terry Morris. And let's see, who else? Man, I'm drawing a blank. Terry, what's the young man that works for the UP now? That's in the Texas Western? David, help me out. He helped set up our trip when we chased the big boy through Texas.
Eric Lewis.
Eric Lewis. Thank you, Chris. The 4 or 5 of us are going to sit around and swap railroad stories about funny things or crazy things that happened on the railroad when we were all working there. Dwayne's case, his dad and his grandfather were both railroaders. And Dwayne basically, I'm sorry?
Great-grandfather and uncle.
Great-grandfather, several generations. Dwayne broke the mold and broke the lineage there, but he grew up sitting on his dad's lap inside of a locomotive as they would go in Springfield, and they were switching boxcars and doing everything else. So we're gonna have some great fun stories to talk about. Gonna be a lot of fun. I'm sorry, Terry.
It was all serious. There was no funny stories.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And therein the sarcasm begins. That's a teaser for next month. So
yeah.
Thanks, Terry. We appreciate it. Guys, you guys have a safe rest of the weekend. Stay safe wherever you are. And let's maintain our social distancing, regardless of what everybody else is doing out there. And you guys take care of yourselves and take care of your family. We'll see you again right here next month, second Saturday of the month, 10 o'clock. We'll send out everything. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great time. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, one last thing. AP deadline is the 19th. So if you've got paperwork, if you can get it to me in the next 5 or 6 days, I can get it in the hopper for this month.
All right. Good deal. Have a great time, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye all.